Whoops. That was bad. Get out of that. It's great to see you. Mic check. Hello, everyone. Once again, we will be reading General Patton's Principles for Life and Leadership by Porter B. Williamson. Contents. We can always learn from each other. Always do everything you ask of the men you command. A commander will command. Summer soldiers will be transferred before the sun goes down. Keep a quick line of communication. Punishment for mistakes must be immediate, or a dead man does not have any ego. Say what you mean, and mean what you say. Any man who thinks he is indispensable ain't. The mission is all important. Think about standard rules later. Always be alert to the source of trouble. Select leaders for accomplishment and not for affection. Every leader must have authority to match his responsibility. Protect the troops first. The wishes of superior officers are secondary. An active mind cannot exist in an inactive body. Make the mind control the body. Never let the body command the mind. Brain power comes from the lungs. There is no power in a bushel of blubber. Keep your feet clean and study the Bible. Keep moving, and pain will never hit you. To gain strength, always go beyond exhaustion. Pride in self starts with pride in appearance. Never fear failure. Never take counsel of your fears. When at war, we must kill people. Grab them by the nose and kick them in the pants. Man is the only war machine. In the long run, it is what we do not say that will destroy us. Talk with the troops. No one is thinking if everyone is thinking alike. Know what you know and know what you do not know. Get up front. Never make a decision too early or too late. Too much ifin, perhaps in, and maybe in, will never win a battle. No good decision was ever made in a swivel chair. The way to win is to never lose. Never let the enemy pick the last battle site. Never fight a battle when nothing can be gained by winning. Success is how you bounce on the bottom. Always keep something in reserve. Revenge belongs to God. Death can be more exciting than life. Better to fight for something in life than die for nothing. Fear kills more people than death. Never let death catch you in bed. History will give him tributes forever. Preface. God is truth is an Old Testament principle which General Patton followed. He spoke the truth when it was unpopular to speak truth. By his words and his actions, he constantly attempted to get at the basic truth of every situation. He slapped the man who needed to be slapped. 10 years after the face slapping incident, this man admitted General Patton had every right to give more severe discipline than a slap. Interviewed by a newspaper reporter, this man admitted, maybe if I had played it right, I could have gotten home a lot sooner. Soldiers do not try to get home sooner when there is a war to be won. Many readers who served with General Patton may note that I have not listed all of his principles. Not all of his expressions resulted in some event which can be reported. It would be difficult to give examples for the following principles. Every man is expendable, including generals. If the results are worth it, if we run out of food, we will get the enemy or each other. General Patton often used the expression, an ounce of sweat will save a gallon of blood. I regret that I cannot remember all the phrases which General Patton used. He was the king of all phrase makers. His barbs of truth sharpened the minds of every listener. I've tried to imitate General Patton's talent for using machine gun bursts of words. Between the short bursts of words, he would pause to let the troops enjoy a laugh or to absorb the full truth of his statement. When General Patton spoke to the troops, he held the attention of every soldier, and he said as much with his carefully timed silent troops. And he said as much with his carefully timed silent periods as he did with his machine gun bursts of words. Many readers will puzzle over the absence of profanity in this book. No one could imitate General Patton's profanity. Several Patton authors called the general arrogant, foolhardy, and flamboyant. No writer caught the importance of the pistols, the arrogant lectures, and the flamboyant actions as the carefully rehearsed and planned actions of a man who knew how to lead men into combat with the enemy and with death. No writer who called General Patton foolhardy caught the importance of immediate pursuit of the retreating enemy. No writer caught the humility and the religion of General Patton. The first draft of this book was sent to Major General George S. Patton, the son, who returned the manuscript with only one word changed. He suggested that the principle, never listen to your fears, should be never take counsel of your fears. I knew he was correct. I had listened in place of counsel for an easier word to understand. Many readers have written to confirm the incidents which I report about General Patton. I have a great pride in the words of Miss Ruth Ellen Totten, the general's daughter, who said, "Your book is the best book about my father." Also, the opinion of General Patton's son, who said, "I know my father would be proud to have his principles sorted out by you." Also, the opinion of General Patton's son, who said, "I know my father would be proud to have his principles sorted out by you." Oh no, what's going on here? No, I can always just do it again. Let's see what I can do here. Now let's go on my Facebook. And hold on. Wait, what? Okay. Use your free account to borrow this book and gain access to all pages. So I have to click this button up there for an hour and then borrow it, and then it's renewable every hour. pending availability. Okay. So I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen for a second so we don't see any addresses and see how this goes. I don't want to like stop the live stream though. Okay, cool. And then let's see how it looks on my phone. Just wondering. What do you see? Okay. Okay. Think I got it figured out? Okay. Can you hear me? Let's see. Whoops. Let's see. Okay. It's always good to double check. We can always learn from each other. I served with General George S. Patton, Jr. No man served under General Patton. He was always serving with us. In truth, I still serve with General Patton, and he continues to serve with me. He makes me take cold showers, he makes me take deep breaths, and he makes me pull in my bushel of blubber. He served with me when the doctors told me I had terminal cancer. He told me, "Did you ever stop to think that death can be more exciting than life?" When I fall, he tells me, "The test of success is not what you do when you're on top. Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom." When I have a difficult discussion to make, he tells me no decision is difficult to make if you get all of the facts. When I get scared, he says, "Never take counsel of your fears." When I get angry and want to strike back in revenge, he orders, "Do not forget, revenge belongs to God." I will relate the general patents. I will relate the general patent principles, which I remember. General Patton was a genius. If a genius is a man with ideas 30 years ahead of the leaders of society, General Patton combined the genius of a military leader with the talents of a religious scholar. My first meeting with General Patton was on a bridge over a small stream in South Carolina. It was a chilly afternoon in November, a few days before Pearl Harbor. In December of 1941, we were on maneuvers, war games, with the first armored corps. In a few months, let's look these up. I hope that's let's be good. I like to respect the military. Let's look up what this says. Where is it? One armored corpse, right? It definitely says one. I keep on asking that. First Armored Division. Nice. We were on maneuvers, war games, with the First Armored Corps. In a few months, the First Armored Corps would have over 50,000 men. In November 1941, the First Armored Corps had a dozen. Always learn from each other. Officers and less than 100 men in the headquarters company, the First Armored Corps, had been created in the mid-year of 1941 to coordinate the 1st and 2nd Armored Divisions of the United States Army. At full strength, an armored division would have 15,000 men. In the few months since the 1st Armored Corps had been authorized, only a limited amount of weapons and equipment had been received. We did have an abundance of staff cars because the Army staff cars were exactly the same as the civilian four-door sedans except for the GI drab color. When our 1st Armored Corps was moved to South Carolina, we received orders that General Patton's 2nd Armored Division would be under our command. General Patton's reputation was so well known that our G4 supply officer asked for an immediate transfer. This regular Army colonel was a competent and well-trained officer. When he learned that he had to supply fuel and rations to General Patton's division, the colonel said, "There is no way in the world fuel can be delivered to that hell on wheels division. We do not have the trucks, nor cans, nor men. I'm getting out of the 1st Armored Corps. I'm not going to be made to look like a fool at this stage of my military career." Hell on Wheels was the name General Patton had given his division to indicate their speed of travel. Cans were the usual 5-gallon gas cans now available in war surplus stores. Refueling an armored tank in the field required the 5-gallon cans be carried by soldiers. Gasoline and diesel tank trucks could not roll through the fields, nor could tank trucks be exposed to aircraft attacks. The fuel was pumped, milked, into the 5-gallon cans from the tank trucks and carried by the men for several hundred yards to the tanks. Large trucks could not go through the mud and fields as easily as the track laying tanks. However, the tanks were not permitted to park bumper to bumper to avoid being an easy target for planes. With the transfer of our G4 officer to Fort Knox, the task of keeping General Patton supplied with fuel fell upon me, the only other G4 officer on the 1st Armored Corps staff. As a first lieutenant, I could fail, as I was advised by our chief of staff. The failure would be based on my lack of military experience, since I was a civilian reserve officer. Despite my lack of experience, I was determined to do the best I could, whether I failed or not. As I think about the event now, 35 years later, I'm certain that the Carolina War game was a maneuver to cause General Patton to fail with the new things called tanks. The old line officers in the infantry, field artillery, and cavalry wanted to win all wars. The new tanks changed the ideas about how to win wars. The horse cavalry existed in name with few horses, but the old line officers continued to think horse tactics without any thought of using tanks. As Billy Mitchell pushed for the use of aircraft in war, General Patton pushed for the use of armored tanks. One way to prove that tanks would fail in war would be to cut off General Patton's gas and diesel fuel supplies. I had a good relationship with our 1st Armored Corps Chief of Staff, the first officer in rank under the commanding general. It was this senior colonel who advised me that I could fail without causing any loss in efficiency. points for my military file. I talked to the chief of staff about my authority as the G4 officer, how much money I could spend, and what procedures to follow. After many years of cutting money for defense, Congress in 1941 wanted to get money to the Army as fast as possible. We had more money than we could spend. With the help of the Chief of Staff, one, with the help of the Chief of Staff, with the help of the Chief of Staff, I secured the proper papers to spend any amount of money necessary to get fuel to General Patton's 2nd Armored Division. With this authorization, my impressive staff car and driver, I set out to do the best I could. All of our fuel was in railroad tank cars in a city about 70 miles from the combat area. There was ample gasoline and diesel fuel, but the fuel was too far away. Since we didn't have the tank trucks, cans, nor men, the only way to solve the problem would be to move the fuel by rail. With this plan in mind, I picked up a driver and we drove to the railroad center where our gas was located. I carried all of my papers into the railroad office to talk with the officials. In November of 1941, with the war raging in Europe, civilians would do anything to help with the war games. I asked that the tank cars be moved to the battle area and spotted, parked on a railroad track that was higher than the land along the side of the railroad tracks. With the tank cars elevated, we could use gravity to fill the little 5-gallon cans and forget about needing milkers to pump the fuel into the cans. With luck, we might be able to refuel the armored tanks directly from the railroad cars on a drive-up basis. There was a major problem. It was Saturday. No train crews were on duty to move the tank cars. As I recall the conversation with the railroad officers, I can understand their attitude. They could not believe that a young first lieutenant could spend so much money. After several telephone calls, the officials said it could be done. Many little problems remained as major hurdles. Overtime pay, approval of the train dispatchers in charge of the trains already on the tracks, a secretary type a large a secretary to type a large bundle of forms, and whether to type one form, bill of lading, for each tank car, or one form for all of the tank cars. Bill of lading. I could type, so I typed the forms for the railroad officials, who told me what to type as they looked over my shoulder. While we waited for the train crew, we studied the railroad maps. While we waited for the train crew, we studied the railroad maps. While we waited for the train crew, we studied the railroad maps. I drew a circle around the area where we needed the fuel. There was numerous calls to my boss, the chief of staff for the 1st Armored Corps. I wanted to be sure that moving the gas by rail did not break any of the war game rules. The chief of staff checked with the umpires. The chief of staff checked with the umpires for the war game, and we were legal. I did not leave the railroad office until the train crew was moving the tank cars out of the railroad yard and onto the main track. All other trains were to take the side tracks and wait for the tank cars to pass. The railroad officials were kind and did not make an excessive charge for the special train crew. Finally, my driver and I left for the area where we hoped to find the train crew with a tank car of gasoline and diesel fuel for the tanks and trucks. Several hours later, we met the train at the elevated track near a highway. The tank cars were parked about 200 feet apart to make it easier for the armored tanks to pull in for refueling. There was sufficient gravity for the fuel to flow into the armored tanks without the use of any milking machines. Everything seemed perfect. A row of trees along the highway protected the refueling operation from easy vision from enemy aircraft. My new problem was how to get the information to General Patton's headquarters. Nothing would be gained if the 2nd Armored, the Hell on Wheels Division, did not know where the fuel was located. I did not have any success in trying to reach General Patton's headquarters because they were not connected into any public telephone system. In 1941, we did not have many shortwave radios or our military vehicles. Most of the radios we had were usually in for repair due to the rough usage required by our war equipment. I did reach our corps headquarters and relayed the location of the gasoline. The instructions to the 2nd Armored Division had to be exact. The entire division would have to travel a narrow country road. It would be foolish to send 12,000 men with tanks and trucks down a rural highway hunting for a row of tank cars. General Patton's officers had to know exactly where the fuel was located. Time was short. At midnight, the 2nd Armored Division would be moving out for the attack. I could see that my plans would be a total failure if the 2nd Armored Division could not get the fuel. In November, darkness would come early. I was beginning to understand the reason the senior colonel wanted to be far away when the war game started. I could see that I would be charged with losing a large sum of money by putting fuel in a place where it could not be used. I directed my driver to use country roads going towards the area where the 2nd Armored Division was reported to be. I wanted to find some troops where the colors of the 2nd Armored Division so I could find their headquarters. As we drove towards a small bridge, I was happy to see a 2nd Armored tank, but I was disgusted because the tank was blocking the narrow bridge across a small stream I needed to cross. A gray-haired sergeant was in the turn of the tank. I judged the man to be a World War I sergeant who could be as stubborn as he was old. According to the war game rules, armored tanks were not permitted to use any bridge. Tanks had to cross the streams in the water. If the tanks could not cross the stream, the engineers had to build a pontoon bridge. In war, it was assumed that all bridges would be destroyed. I would read the rules to the army sergeant and get him off the bridge. Cooling my anger, I reasoned that before I ordered the sergeant off the bridge, I should try to learn where the 2nd Armored headquarters was located. If I made the sergeant angry, he would refuse to tell me anything. As I approached the bridge, I saw a 2nd tank was submerged in the water at the side of the bridge. Only the turn of the tank was out of the water. I studied the sunken tank as I approached the bridge. "She's in deep," a high-pitched voice called. The men got out and are safe. The old army sergeant put on his helmet, and I saw 2 silver stars. Going into shock, I could see 2 silver stars on the tank. It was General Patton, who had called to me. "Yes, sir." I froze in place. Their speed was not high enough when they hit the water, so they sunk. I'm sure they could have floated a bit if they had hit the water at top speed. We got to be able to cross this kind of stuff without bridges. It takes too much time to build a pontoon bridge for these little streams. I keep seeing this word, and I don't know why, but I'm looking it up. It's pantoons. How's that possible? It's pontoons? What was I saying? I was saying that. Yeah.
Pontoons.
Yeah, it's pontoons. Okay. I'm just making sure. Yes, sir. General Patton continued to explain the proper way to maneuver a tank across the stream. Finally, he asked, "What outfit you with?" "One First Armored Corps, sir." "Where in hell is the G4? The supply officer? Where in hell is the fuel? I need gas and lots of it." Understand, fuel is 100 miles away. General Patton continued to ask questions. At last, he called our former supply officer, known as G4, by name and asked if I knew what the colonel planned to do about the fuel supply problem. I answered, "He does not plan to do anything, sir. Then this war game will be over before it starts. I cannot move 10 miles without gas." He continued to stress the need for fuel. Finally, he asked if I know. Finally, he asked if I knew where the former G4 officer could be reached. "He cannot be reached, sir. He's on his way to Fort Knox. He has transferred out of the he has transferred out of our first armored corps." Then who in hell is the G4 for first armored corps? "I am, sir." There was a silence as General Patton stared at me in amazement. He mumbled profanity and disappeared into his tank. I turned away and walked to my staff car. It was easy to see that General Patton was disgusted that such a junior officer was in charge of his fuel problems. I was disgusted that I had not been permitted to explain where the fuel was located before I reached the staff car. General Patton called, "Lieutenant!" I turned to see him jump from the tank with a bundle of maps in his hand. "I'm General Patton. I am the commanding general of the 2nd Armored Division. We need diesel fuel and gas, lots of it. What's your name?" I gave him my name. General Patton started with simple facts. "We've got a real problem here." He spread his maps on the trunk of my staff car. Pointing on the map, he said, "Right here is where we expect General Drum to be with his first army. This is the enemy we have to destroy. Our problem is we have to cross several little streams, like this one here, in order to get into a position for a battle into this area. In this area. The problem is we do not have any fuel." When I had a chance to speak, I said, "General, in the armed corps, we do not have gas trucks, cans, nor men to move 100 gallons of any type of fuel. There's no possible way we could supply fuel on the route which you have pointed out on your map. I'm sorry to say that the only place we can get fuel to you is here." I pointed to the area where the tank cars were parked on the railroad tracks. We could not find the exact location on General Patton's maps, since his map did not show railroads. "General, let me show you on my map where the gas is available." I reached into the car for my maps. My driver was sitting as stiff as a mummy. Everyone was rigid when General Patton was near. As I unfolded my maps, General Patton asked, "Where did you get that map?" "From National Geographic," I answered. "How?" "I subscribe to the magazine. The maps come with the magazine." Studying the map, he commanded. Studying the map, he commented, "Your map is a hell of a lot better than mine. I have been using gas station maps. All of the military maps are out of date. None of my maps show the railroads." We compared maps. I was anxious to explain the facts about the location of the railroad tank cars, but did not have a chance. I was a new military officer without much knowledge of the unwritten military rules, but I knew that 2-star generals were not interrupted. General Patton continued to present the problem. "Knowing the railroads, I doubt that they would move the gas for a week. We need that gas now. Even if we could get gas where you say we are dry, but we could send trucks for a few thousand gallons, but we couldn't get the gas out of a tank car without milkers. All this would be in violation of the rules for these war games." General Patton paused and smiled. But if it was my turn to smile, "General Patton, the fuel is on the railroad tracks Right there now. I pointed to the marks I had made on my map, which had all of the railroads. It is not in violation of the rules for the war games. Our 1st Armored Corps Chief of Staff, check this out with the war game umpires. But the railhead is off the main highways where we had planned to attack. Lieutenant, whose idea was it to move that gas by rail? Do you know that the tank cars are there and going to stay there? If we roll up there and get stranded dry without gas away from the battle area, we could look stupid, to say at the least. I just came from there. The railroad will not move the tank cars. I had the task of getting fuel to you, and that is the only place I could see that we could make the fuel available. I have been assured that the tank cars will not be moved for a week. Can't be. This war game does not start until midnight tonight. You broke the rules by moving too early. General, if it is a violation of the rules, it is not your fault because our chief of staff cleared everything. That fuel can be considered fuel which you could capture from the enemy. Can we just go up there and tank up? Are you sure we will not get in trouble with the war game umpires or the railroad? I explained the clearance from the umpires, the gravity feed plan for the tank cars, the contract with railroad, and all of the facts that I had about the tank cars. General Patton took my map and opened it to full size on the top of the staff car. He was tall enough to use the top of the four-door sedan. I continued to hold the other maps on the trunk of the car. He drummed his fingers on the top of the car and mumbled, "No one would ever expect us to take a longer route. It is further, but we will have plenty of fuel. We will send a light force. They would be able to return with enough fuel to... in 6 hours?" General Patton smiled and turned to me. "You son of a bitch. You've done it. We can sure learn from each other. May I borrow your map? My old friend, General Drum, will not even have a map showing where I'm going to attack. General Drum is the commander of the army against us. You know, he's an old friend. But I sure as hell would enjoy capturing him. It will prove tanks can win wars." I agreed to loan my map. Requests of a 2-star general were not denied by a lieutenant. He gave his gas station maps to me, saying, "Not a fair trade, but we got to move fast. Would you wait right here for a minute until I try to cross the stream? I want to be sure that our tanks can cross this kind of water without a pontoon bridge. Then, if I may, I would like to hitchhike a ride with you to my headquarters. I have to get back as fast as possible to make a complete change in our battle plan." As we walked towards the bridge and General Patton's tank, he said, "We can always learn from each other. You watched me cross this stream. You taught me that you reverse. You taught me that you reserve officers. You taught me that you reserve officers can come up with new ways to solve problems. I'll show you how to get a tank across a small river." General Patton ran towards his tank. I walked towards the bridge. At first, I was disgusted. He went into such detail about the fuel problem. I'd been in the middle of that problem all day. I was amazed. A 2-star general would ask to hitchhike a ride with a lieutenant. Most generals would have taken over my car and driver. It was also amazing to see a 2-star general run. Okay, so it's 9:20. We have 9:51, and then we have to return it and then borrow it again for free. So it's 9:20. Let's try to make. I don't know. Let's see how long was that. Geez, I don't even know how long it was, but that's okay. I think it was like, well, it's 9:20, and it took like 20 minutes to do that. It's okay. I apologize for swearing, by the way. We're gonna take a 5-minute break, or like a 10-minute break. We'll be back, and then at like at 9:51 we gotta stop. It's gonna stop eventually. So that's the problem, is that it will stop. The live stream's gonna keep going though. Just trying to think how to do this. Oh, I can just do it right here. I can do it right here. It's not a problem, right? Shouldn't be a problem. I can always just turn off the screen sharing, right? Okay, I'll be back. Thanks, guys. Okay, it says 936 and then 951 here. So, we have like, over 11 minutes to go. So, that's actually not a bad idea. Hold on. I know what to do. Something's going on with like the formatting. I don't know um, what the book's doing right now. It's okay. I don't mind. Well, that didn't work. Just made it worse, kind of. Okay. How would I go to the next page? Oh, cool. All right, here we go. Always do everything you ask of the men you command. General Patton jumped onto the side of his tank and squeezed into the turn. The tank driver buttoned up by closing the front metal window of the tank so that water and bullets could not enter. When the driver was buttoned up, the man in the turret controlled the direction of the tank by pressure on the right or left shoulder of the driver. The speed of the turn was determined by the amount of pressure of the tank commander's foot on the driver's shoulder. Hard pressure on the right shoulder was in order to make a hard right turn. This was not a good system, but the best we had been able to invent in 1941. When the driver was buttoned up, he had a tiny periscope for his forward vision, but the area he could see outside the tank was a blur. Most of the time, the man in the turret controlled the direction of the tank. General Patton's head popped out of the turret. The armored tank backed off of the bridge and into the weeds along the roadside ditch. When the tank had backed about a 50 yards from the bridge. The driver raced his engine to full speed. General Patton braced his body against the iron sides of the turret. The tank tracks started throwing dirt into the air as the tank headed for the river. There was a great splash as the tank hit the water. The engine sputtered. I was sure there would be a wet general swimming out of the tank. The silver stars of the general's flag disappeared under the water. For a moment, the tank floated on the water until the tank's tracks jammed into the mud on the other side of the stream. The engine continued to sputter, but the tank rolled up the bank. When the tank stopped, mud and water dripped from every nut and bolt. Always do everything you ask of the men you command. General Patton's head disappeared again as he went into the tank. Suddenly, he was out of the tank and running towards me. I would learn later that General Patton had followed one of his basic principles. Always do everything you ask of the men you command. A slow attack on the river with a tank, and the tank would sink as the tank on the side of the bridge had done. Within a few hours, in the darkness of midnight, every tank of the 2nd Armored Division would cross that little river and several other small rivers. On the drive to General Patton's headquarters, he never gave a single instruction to my driver. I did not know which country road to take, but General Patton did not give any orders to my driver. He would say, "Would you ask your driver to turn at the next road?" I did not need to repeat the instruction. The driver obeyed General Patton's questions to me. I was in 1st Armored Corps, which did not take any orders from the 2nd Armored Division, a lower military organization in the chain of command. General Patton would not give any orders to my driver. When we reached General Patton's headquarters, he thanked me for the maps and the ride he ran for his office tent. When I reached our corps headquarters, I was ordered back into the combat zone with a new driver. Drivers had to have sleep. Officers could sleep while the staff cars were moving. I never found any unit of the 2nd Armored Division that night nor the next morning. The Hell on Wheels Division was living up to its name. I spent Sunday driving from town to town, trying to find General Patton's headquarters to arrange for a new railhead for fuel and rations. Early Sunday afternoon, General Drum, the enemy commander, drove into the combat zone to have photos taken for the newspapers and photo magazines. The war game was to last for 10 days. General Drum reasoned that the maneuvers would not get started until Monday morning. Sunday would be the day for both forces to prepare for the maneuvers on Monday. The photo taking was a disaster for General Drum, but a great day for the photographers, as the photographers were shooting the action pictures of General Drum riding into combat with his arms waving and shouting orders. An advanced group of General Patton's motorcycle riflemen roared into the area with all of their sirens screaming. Nothing in the war game rules made any exceptions for captured generals. General Drum was treated as any other prisoner of war, to the enjoyment of the news photographers. No amount of talking would move General Patton's riflemen to release General Drum. When General Patton arrived, General Drum asked not to be treated as a regular prisoner of war. General Patton consented. General Patton consented, provided General Drum would surrender his dress saber for the benefit of the photographers. General Drum refused. General Patton ordered his men to wrap General Drum in toilet paper to indicate capture. General Drum protested that General Patton's men were out of uniform because they were wearing civilian overcoats. General Patton went into a rage, accusing General Drum of playing politics by having winter clothing and gasoline at a rail center 70 miles from the war zone. General Patton also asked in front of the media, "Have you briefed these men that you have an army of 196,000 opposing our army of only 99,000? How much politics are you playing in this war game?" General Drum was silent and handed General Patton his dress saber, with which General Patton returned after photos were taken. No photo of this capture appeared in the New York Times. I learned of General Drum's capture from a telephone operator who had a soft Southern accent. She told me she talked with a General Drum who wanted to be released in the worst way from a prisoner of war camp. She said, "My, but that man was sure having a hissy fit." Although the war game was over with the capture of General Drum, I was busy day and night trying to get rations, supplies, and fuel relocated for the 2nd Armored Division. I changed from the staff car to a captured Jeep. The Jeep could go into the fields and wooded areas. Several nights later, completely exhausted, I returned to 1st Armored Corps headquarters. Our chief of staff complimented me, saying, "Keeping General Patton happy is not an easy assignment." He gave us all kinds of compliments for our moving fast enough to keep him supplied with gas and rations. I went to my small wall tent and fell on my cot in a cold chill. With 4 blankets, I could not stop shaking. Our corpse surgeon checked on me and piled on more blankets. The shaking and the chill stopped, but the corpse surgeon wanted a patient to put in his new ambulance. He strapped me on a litter, MASH style, and sent me to a hospital. I never returned to 1st Armored Corps in South Carolina. With the capture of General Drum, the maneuvers ended. General Patton had set the record clear that tanks could win wars. When I returned, when I rejoiced, what, when I rejoiced 1st Armored Corps in a new building at Fort Knox, Kentucky, it was Sunday afternoon, and the radio was blaring something about enemy planes bombing Pearl Harbor. One of the senior officers on the staff said, "Those radio people will do anything to try to get people excited enough to listen to them." Our intelligence officer for the Corps suggested, "We knew that a Navy task force was in the Pacific. That news must be correct. I'm sure we are in the war." Within a few days after the arrival of the 1st Armored Corps in Fort Knox, Kentucky, we were ordered to Fort Benning, Georgia. The 2nd Armored Division and General Patton were stationed at Fort Benning. The rumors were getting stronger that General Patton would be the new commanding general of our Armored Corps. General Charles Scott, our commanding general, was several years past retirement age. We knew that General Scott would be retired as soon as we had more officers on the staff. Many officers on our staff were alarmed that they might have to serve with General Patton. Although my experience with General Patton resulted in my going to the hospital for exhaustion and a cold chill, I had enjoyed working with General Patton and his staff. In 1976, 35 years after the Carolina maneuvers, I was watching a television interview of one of Doctor's advisors. I had forgotten about the refueling problem until I heard FDR's advisor Comment: The Carolina maneuver, the Carolina maneuvers of 1941 kept General Drum from a high command in World War II. He was in line for the top command in Europe. General Patton captured General Drum on the first day of the war game. Drum accused Patton of buying gas from the local gas stations with his own money. Drum never recovered from his capture by General Patton's men. I think he retired after he lost the Carolina war game in front of all of the news media. General Patton would never hesitate to use his own money to purchase fuel from local service stations if it had been possible to buy from service stations. However, heavy armored tanks cannot use the roads to get to the local gas stations. No gas station would have enough gas and diesel fuel for a division of armored tanks. As I listened to the television interview, I remembered again of our suspicions of 1941 that the political military leader. As I listened to the television interview, I remembered again of our suspicions of 1941 that the political military leaders had planned to make General Patton and the tanks appear worthless in war. Their plan had failed. All right. A commander will command. We're going to be back soon. 10:37 it says, but that says 9:53. So let's get back. I'm gonna try to get back here around like 10:05, something like that. 10:10. I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep reading. I'll be back. All right, it says 10:07, but 10:37 there. A commander will command. When General Patton assumed a command, there was an instant change throughout the entire organization. The command changed as if every man changed from 110-volt motivation to 440. Executive managers and psychologists, executive managers and psychologists lecture on how to exercise authority and to command men and women to gain an objective. General Patton did not follow many of the usual principles of management. Psychologists would complain that General Patton's principles failed to protect the ego of the person. General Patton would answer that a dead soldier did not have any ego. Everything General Patton did was to prevent his soldiers from being killed so that they could kill the enemy. Ego building, face saving, and all the time consuming methods, begging a worker to work cannot be used in time of war. I will never forget General Patton assuming command of 1st Armored Corps. I am grateful to the soldier who snapped a picture of the event. The photo is fuzzy, but the straight line of General Patton's 2nd Armored Division troops and our ragtag group of staff members of 1st Armored Corps all can be seen except the 2 stray dogs. It was January 15th, 1942, a few weeks after Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1st Armored Corps had moved from Fort Knox to a bivouac camp in a pine tree grove on the edge of the main post of Fort Benning, Georgia. Our 1st Armored Corps was a hybrid military organization. Fort Benning was a standard brand type of military organization, an infantry post. The 1st Armored Corps was a collection of men from the infantry, field artillery, and cavalry. In simple terms, the armored tanks did the work of the foot soldiers, used the big guns of the field artillery, and raced into combat at speeds that exceeded the speed of horses. Although Hitler was using tanks to destroy Europe, many of our infantry, field artillery, and cavalry officers were not ready to let any new tank outfit take over their duties. There was a dream among the cavalrymen that there would be a day when horses would return. Many of these horse-thinking officers held high positions of command in Washington. No tank outfit would be permitted to change the established military trunk to tail thinking of who would get the command positions to win the war. Most of the old line military officers wanted tanks to be in their command. Few leaders wanted a new armored force equipped with only tanks. Such a drastic step would change war from defense to offense. Because we were a hybrid organization with our loud and noisy tanks, we were removed from the main post area of Fort Benning. Another reason for us to be off the main post was that our track laying tanks could destroy concrete and blacktop roads. In our off post area, our headquarters building looked like a small chicken house for laying hens. We lived in tents and used the pot-bellied stoves from World War I for heating our tents in our headquarters building. We received orders from Washington that General Patton would assume command of our 1st Armored Corps on the 15th day of January 1942. No hour of the day was indicated on the order. Usually a new commanding general would arrive sometime after the date for assuming command and would stroll into headquarters after he and his wife had moved their clothes and property into military quarters. All of our quarters were in tents, including the quarters for the commanding general, until General Patton built a log cabin, which was his home and our officers' club. The day after receiving the notice that General Patton would assume command, we received an order from General Patton. The General Patton order gave the same date and set the exact hour, 11 o'clock, that General Patton would assume command. This second order provoked laughter from the older officers on the staff. It was unheard of for a new commander to set an exact hour for assuming command. Knowing of General Patton's reputation, some of the older officers transferred to other organizations rather than serve with General Patton. We younger officers were not excited because we had served under several new commanding generals. There was such a great shortage of officers for all ranks that a new general was as common as a new truck or tank. The morning that General Patton was to assume command, I started working without remembering that it was the day General Patton was to arrive. As a first lieutenant, I would not have any military function or duty assignment for the new commander's arrival. In a few days, I would be asked for reports on my area of work. An hour before General Patton's arrival time, we heard sirens screaming in the distance. The sirens seemed to be coming from the main post area of Fort Benning. The sirens were so loud, we were certain that several buildings were burning. Some of our staff officers, who had field glasses, attempted to locate smoke from the main post area. One officer remarked, "The sirens seem to be coming our way. We must have a fire in our area." We walked around our building, trying to see the location of any fire in our camp. Suddenly, a dozen motorcycles roared into our camp with their sirens screaming full blast. Every motorcycle rifleman was wearing a gleaming helmet with the insignia of the 2nd Armored Division, General Patton's Hell on Wheels Division. Every man dismounted from his motorcycle and grabbed a polished rifle. They surrounded our buildings with their rifles ready to fire. Not one of the riflemen spoke to us. I am sure that enemy troops would have shown more interest in us. It was half an hour before the time set for General Patton to assume command. One of our senior officers commented, "We're sure going to be in for something." We went inside our headquarters and tried to get back to work, thinking this would be what General Patton would want us to be doing when he arrived. Again, we heard sirens in the distance. We could hear the rumble of heavy track laying vehicles. We had not had rain for several days. The track laying vehicles were curling up clouds of dust. It had to be General Patton coming. In advance of General Patton were 2 light tanks, followed by several armored track laying personnel carriers. These carriers had armor plate for the protection of a dozen armed soldiers. In the convoy with the tanks were 2 army trucks carrying more soldiers, and we were to discover they carried an American flag, the flag of the 1st Armored Corps, and the flag of a 2-star general. We had only one American flag in our area without any flags in front of our headquarters. No flag for our 1st Armored Corps and no flag for any general because our commanding general had already retired. When the convoy stopped in front of our building, the flags were posted in flag stands, also furnished by the soldiers from the 2nd Armored Division. The flag posting ceremony was done with sharp commands and heel-clicking precision. All the flags were covered. General Patton's soldiers formed in a double rank opposite our headquarters building. 5 of the soldiers remained with the covered flags. Every soldier was at rigid attention except for the automatic riflemen, who were holding their rifles in position ready to fire. I could see their fingers on the triggers. And was concerned that they could have live bullets. By the time the ceremony of posting the covered flags, by the by the time the ceremony of posting the covered flags in the flag, by the time the ceremony of posting the covered flags in the flag stands was finished, all of the First Armored Corps staff were outside watching. Our chief of staff suggested, perhaps we should try to get into some sort of military formation. We lined up opposite of the soldiers from General Patton's 2nd Armored Division. There was a contrast in our military procedures and our appearance. General Patton's soldiers lined up with commands. Dress right. Dress. Every soldier clicked into a straight line. We sauntered into a wavy line without any commands. We wore different uniforms. Some of our officers were in winter uniforms, and some of our officers were in winter uniforms, and some were in part summer and part winter uniform. Some of our officers insisted on wearing the insignia and shoulder patch of their old cavalry or field artillery units. Few of us had the insignia of the armored corps. Some wore the overseas cap, the flat type. Others wore the cap with the bill, the garrison type. Some were without any headgear. One officer wore a campaign hat, which was first used in the war with Spain. We whispered and talked with each other. General Patton's men were so silent and stern that we stopped our whispering. A master sergeant shouted, "Attention!" and General Patton's men snapped to attention. We attempted to stand erect because coming into our area was a shiny World War II command car. No top, 2 seats, and a bar on the front seat to give support when riding in a standing position in the back seat. Standing erect at the bar was General Patton. The command car stopped in front of the men from the 2nd Armored Division. General Patton ignored us, not even a glance or smile in our direction. As he dismounted from the command car, one of our officers whispered, "Here comes a speech." General Patton approached his men, stopped, clicked his heels, and saluted. The sergeant was ready with a salute, and when they dropped their hands, General Patton shouted, "Dismissed!" General Patton continued to ignore us and walked to the front of our headquarters building. The 5 men standing by the covered flags were at attention. The general ordered, "Sergeant, post the colors." General Patton snapped into a salute and held it as the men uncovered the bright new flags. General Patton dropped his hand salute and ordered, "Dismissed." He did a left face and marched toward us. In front of us, he did a rigid right face. He did not salute us nor speak. The soldiers of the 2nd Armored Division were driving away from our area. The soldiers attempted to hide their sobbing under their shiny helmets. General Patton looked at his wristwatch. It was a few minutes before 11, the hour to assume command. I'm sure he was counting the seconds until 11. His eyes did not meet ours. He gazed over our heads into the sky. Suddenly he saluted us. We returned his salute, and he started speaking. "I assumed command of the 1st Armored Corps, at ease. With this command, we could stop standing, at attention, and place our hands behind our backs with the left foot moved away from the right, a more restful position. None of our senior officers said, 'Welcome.' No one moved. Not a word from General Patton, such as, 'Glad to be aboard. Glad to join you.' Or 'We will make a great team.' Nothing was said as we waited for General Patton to speak again. Still, at attention, General Patton commenced. We are in a long war against a tough enemy. We must train millions of men to be soldiers. We must make them tough in mind and body, and they must be trained to kill. As officers, we will give leadership in becoming tough physically and mentally. Every man in this command will be able to run a mile in 15 minutes with a full military pack, including a rifle." One of our overweight senior officers chuckled. "Damn it!" General Patton shouted. Sorry for swearing. I just kind of saw the word and then I General Patton shouted. I mean, every man of this command, every officer and enlisted man, staff, and command, every man will run a mile. We will start running from this point in exactly 15 minutes. I will lead. General Patton stopped speaking, but his eyes moved slowly until he caught the eyes of every officer. The silence was so great, the sun seemed to stop in the sky. The two stray dogs, always running around in our area, stopped running and remained motionless, as if at attention, waiting for General Patton's next command. There was no doubt in the minds of any man, nor in the minds of the two stray dogs. General Patton was in command. In today's business world and in the military organizations, many executives are commanders only in the title. It is easy to tell the true commanders from the title only types by listing. Hold on. It is easy to tell the true commanders from a title only types by listening to conversations. I overheard such a conversation in the military officers club. It was before noon on the anniversary of the establishment of the United States Air Force. There was to be a big party in the club. To celebrate the separation of the Army Air Corps from the Army. I was half asleep in the lounge. I was in almost total darkness, watching the assistant club manager arranging glasses and counting the bottles of liquor available for the evening. He did not know that I was in the lounge. The club manager came into the lounge and gave a direct order to the assistant manager. You got to set up a bar at the back door for tonight. Why? The assistant asked. Because the general said so. The general, also said he wants this club to show a profit. The general cannot have a profit in a temporary bar at the back door. I'm not going to take the heat for not having that bar when the general wants it. When he tells me what he wants, I'm going to do what he wants. The assistant continued to count bottles, saying, no problem. I'll take the heat. I do not mind telling the general he cannot ride two horses going in two different directions. He cannot have a profit in a backdoor bar. It's only a few hours, several hundred people will be here. Can you get a bartender for a setup at the back door by evening? Sure, the assistant replied. But do you have any idea of the cost in relation to the number of drinks we would sell at that back door? We would not sell enough to pay for half of the bartender's wage. I know from experience. The general will be angry. I told him we would have a bar at the back door. The manager pleaded, tell the general we cannot afford to have a special backdoor bar. You think I'm crazy? I'm not going to tell him that. Then I'll tell him. I'll call his officer. I'll call his office after lunch. Stop worrying. The manager pointed his finger at the assistant. I want you to know that you have to accept the full responsibility for disobeying the general. No problem. I'm following his orders to put this club on a profitable basis. Did I make myself clear that I am not going to take any blame for this? You did. I'll tell the general that 4 bars are enough for this crowd. We do need a bar at the back door. The general said he did not want anyone to wait for a drink. The manager insisted. They can wait a few minutes without a drink as well as with a drink. Stop worrying about the general. I'll show him the profit he wants. I have reported this conversation from my notes on the exact words. It is quite clear that the assistant manager was the true commander. He was in command of the manager and the general, neither of whom understood the primary mission. In today's business world, this conversation is repeated many times every day with little change in titles of the office or in the problem for the command decision. Many executives hold the title of a commander, but some assistant or secretary makes the command decisions. I had not planned to attend this party, but I could not resist going so that I could not enter by the back door to check on the bar. No back door existed. The assistant manager remained in command. When General Patton was in command, everyone knew who was in command and who would make the decisions. In addition, General Patton would make sure every soldier knew the primary mission. There was never any doubt in the mind of any soldier about General Patton. General Patton was the commander. All right, next we'll be reading Summer Soldiers Will Be Transferred Before the Sun Goes Down. Let's see something, actually. Yeah. One second. Yeah, it says 11:27 and then 10:53. Let's see how far we can get. Maybe we can get through it. Some more soldiers will be transferred before the sun goes down. Before General Patton dismissed us from our first meeting, he pulled a bundle of papers from the inside pocket of his blouse. The military term for a coat was blouse in World War II. With the papers in his hand, General Patton announced, "I have orders for the transfer of every officer of the 1st Armed Corps. Every order is signed and dated today. Every officer refusing to run a mile or wanting a transfer will leave this command before the sun goes down." General Patton was wearing what I would learn was his war face. He shouted, "Those officers wanting to remain in 1st Armed Corps under my command will be back at this point in 15 minutes with full pack ready to run a mile. Dismissed." It was a silent 1st Armed Corps staff that waited to speak until General Patton was inside our headquarters. One senior colonel said, "Gentlemen, it has been great serving with all of you, but I'm taking this chance to get out of anybody. Want to go with me? I can get good assignments for anyone wanting to transfer to a new armored division being formed at Fort Knox." The arguments commenced on the advantages and disadvantages of staying and leaving. As the youngest officer, no one asked me to transfer, and no one asked me to stay. For my Carolina experience with General Patton, I could not see anything unreasonable about his demands. I knew I could not run a mile in 15 minutes with a full military pack. I did not have a military pack. Most of our staff had only bedding rolls. We did not have enough rifles for all of our guards. As I waited for the full pack run, I thought about General Patton's harsh procedure of transferring every officer who wanted out of his command. How unlike the procedures I had learned in college courses on management. So many military and civilian executives assumed command with the words, "It will take me a few months to learn the company policies, and I do not want expect and I do not expect to make any changes in the great traditions of this company," or "I will try to stay on the same course." All such statements were supposed to unite the members of an organization, unite them in the belief that they could continue the same failing policies of the past. General Patton attacked summer soldiers the first minute he was in command. I rolled my bedding roll and strapped on my empty pistol holster, my full pack. No rifle, no shells, no canteen, almost nothing required to have a full military pack for a soldier. At exactly the time specified, General Patton came to the porch of our headquarters to review his staff. We lost several officers on the quick transfers. General Patton's war face was gone. He was smiling. "I do not see a single rifle on any of you. None of you have a full military pack, so we will not run today. But get in shape. You'll be doing a mile run. You'll be doing a run. You'll be doing a mile run every day. Let's meet at the Fort Benning's Officers Club and have lunch." A general's desire was a command, so we met at the Officers Club for lunch. By pre-arrangement, General Patton had reserved a table for the exact number of the man he knew would be present after the transfers. As I remember, we had 16 officers before the transfers. We had 10 officers after the transfers. The moment we were all introduced by our chief of staff, General Patton started his attack on the problems of 1st Armored Corps. He knew more about organization than we did. He outlined his plans, set time limits on training, and scheduled every day of the week for a month. During the session, General Patton, sorry, during the session, General Patton did not give any indication that he had ever seen me. He never called me my name. All references were to me as the G4, which was my duty assignment. I had the answers on the status of our arms and equipment, despite my being able to answer all of General Patton's questions. Despite Despite me being able to answer all of General Patton's questions, he announced that Colonel Hobart Gay would be arriving to assume the duties of G4. He said that I would be Colonel Gay's assistant. With this announcement, he did not call me by name, only by rank. Our lunch continued most of the afternoon. At a break in one of the sessions, one of our senior colonels congratulated me on being assigned as Assistant G4 for the Corps. Being a civilian reserve officer, I asked, "Is that good?" I thought I was being demoted from the position of acting G4. Is that good? You are set for promotions as fast as the days go by. You can never expect to stay on as G4, as a lieutenant. The job calls for a colonel or a one-star general. The assistant, G4, calls for a full colonel. You are only a first lieutenant. You will be holding a position 4 ranks above your present rank. The colonel was not jealous because he would soon have the star of a general. Although I was not serving in the army for promotions, I was annoyed that General Patton had not recognized me, nor commented on the Carolina maneuvers. Later in the week, the general's aide told me to be at the general's tent at 7 in the evening. At this evening meeting, we refought the battles of Carolina and laughed over the captured railroad tank cars. He returned my National Geographic map. He told me about Colonel Gay when he would arrive, and the years Colonel Gay and the general had served together. A few days later, Colonel Gay arrived to assume the work of the office of G4. Colonel Gay became Lieutenant General Gay and was General Patton's chief of staff for 3rd Army during World War II. Colonel Gay and I became close friends. It was General Gay who was riding with General Patton when General Patton was injured in the auto accident in Germany. Before General Patton assumed command of 1st Armored Corps, we were a group of men shuffling papers, trying to get the men and equipment to fill the assignments of an armored corps. The instant General Patton assumed command, we were a team dedicated to one objective: kill the enemy. I thought of Tom Paine's words when General Patton transferred every wavering officer. I'm sure Patton knew the words of Tom Paine. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in the crisis, shrink from the service of their country. These were the words Tom Paine had written during the days that were dark and of the Revolutionary War in 1776. General Patton would not have any summer soldiers on his staff. All right. Oh boy, it's 11:03, and this is 11:27. We're at 32 of 249. We got to keep going. Keep a quick line of communication. At one of our first staff meetings in January 1942, General Patton announced the war in Europe is over for us. England probably will fall early this year. It is going to be a long war. Our chance to get at the enemy will be in North Africa. We cannot train troops to fight in the desert by training in the swamps of Georgia. I've sent a report to Washington requesting orders, moving us to a desert training center in California. The California desert can kill quicker than the enemy. We will lose a lot of men from the heat, but the training will save hundreds of lives when we get into combat. I want every officer and section to start planning on moving all of our troops by rail to California. In less than 60 days, every first armed corps, and in less than 60 days, every first armored corps unit was on troop trains en route to Indio, California. Our final destination was a point in the middle of the desert near the town of Desert Center, which in 1942 had a total population of 19 people. We became two commands, 1st Armored Corps and the Desert Training Center. Our headquarters was approximately 50 miles east of Indio, California. Radio reception was poor due to the long distance between our small portable radios and the broadcasting stations in Palm Springs and Los Angeles. General Patton's first concern was always the welfare of the troops. So he purchased a radio broadcasting transmitter. The initial investment was with his own money. Our Signal Corps troops installed the radio broadcasting equipment. The station broadcasted only news and music. This radio station gave General Patton a quick way to talk to the troops. General Patton talked to the troops as often as possible. At a staff meeting, he said, "This new radio station will save several weeks of training time. We can reach the troops, every one of them, as often as we need. In an emergency, we could reach every man in seconds." Our desert radio broadcasting station had one unusual feature. There was a microphone in General Patton's office, and a second microphone was by his bed in his tent. Day and night, General Patton could cut off all news or music and announce a special message or order from his personal mic. When the music clicked off, we knew we would hear this. It's General Patton. Often General Patton would say, "I want every man to be alert tomorrow because we will be doing the maneuvers for a lot of brass from Washington who don't know the first form thing about tanks or desert warfare." What's up? How you doing?
I'm gonna go to the grocery.
Okay.
What do you want? Do you want a cheeseburger for dinner or something?
Sure, yeah, we can have that, yeah.
I have 2 steaks upstairs that Daddy and I didn't eat on Friday, so I gotta buy you something. What would you like to have?
I'll just do the burgers.
No burger?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ding.
I appreciate it. We must show them how wars can be won with speed. I am counting on every man. The radio would click, and the radio program would return. There was no signing off by General Patton. He said what he wanted to say and clicked off. He never hesitated in using the radio to remove an officer from command. Often his harsh words to an officer would provoke laughter. For example, one time General Patton ordered Colonel Blank, "You are removed from command immediately. You hear me? If you know what is good for you, you will stay away from me for a week." The usual removal from command was accompanied with the order to appear before General Patton immediately. There were many different reasons for removing officers from command. Usually, it was because of a difference in training and strategy. Many National Guard and Reserve officers had been trained in only defensive strategy. General Patton did not believe in defending. He was always on the attack. Any officer who started following the strategy of digging in or preparing to defend was certain to be removed from command. General Patton used the radio to commend special efforts by the troops. He would announce, "Found a damn good soldier today." I can't, I swore again, so I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. He would continue giving the name of the man and his organization. When the officers knew they could be removed in an insult, when the officers knew they could be removed in an instant with the click of the radio, and the enlisted men knew they could be given special recognition by General Patton, every man gave his best effort of every hour of the day. Every evening, General Patton arranged a type of communication that united all soldiers. This communication united us with the soldiers of history. General Patton had buglers blow taps. Every unit down to a company of 200 men had their own bugler, with over 20,000 men sleeping on the ground over a 30-mile strip of the desert valley. We had 100 buglers. A bugle for communication during the day in a tank outfit was as practical as a feather in a hailstorm. No bugler call could be heard above the roar of the tanks and trucks, but in the stillness of the evening, a bugle call would carry for miles, with sound traveling at the rate of 1,100 feet per second. It was impossible for all of the buglers to play taps at the same time. It would take other 5 seconds for the first note of our headquarters bugler to reach a bugler a mile away. Thus, with 100 buglers blowing taps at different places and times, and with the echoes bouncing off the mountains, it was a sound to cause the mind of every man to pause for a moment in prayer. Those bugle calls made us feel we were a part of an organization which had the power of the armies of all the centuries. No soldier could go to sleep after the last echo of the bugle call because the desert coyotes were impressed with the sounds and carried on coyote conversation from every mountain range. The wails of the coyotes continued for a period of time much longer than the bugles. General Patton put us to bed with the pride of knowing that we were a part of a military organization which united all of the forces of nature, including the coyotes. I remember General Patton saying one night, "I love the sound of those bugles. It takes me back to my service in the cavalry when I was an aide to General Pershing in the war against Mexico." Punishment for mistakes must be immediate, or a dead man does not have any ego. General Patton's principles of discipline did not match modern rules for management. The idea of giving reprimands in a quiet and personal conversation to avoid hurt feelings was not for General Patton. I remember his words: "When you make a mistake in war, the punishment is death. The trouble is your mistake could cause hundreds of soldiers to die. In war, the enemy does not give a warning before they shoot. That's not the way war works. If the enemy sees you first, he shoots first." In our staff meetings, General Patton advised instant punishment for every mistake. Often a staff member would go to the defense of a friend and suggest some softer punishment when some officer with a degree in management would explain the new ideas for leadership. General Patton would explode. "All that save the ego nonsense is not for leadership in war. A dead man does not have any ego. How long after you touch a burning match does it take before you get burned? You get your punishment instantly by touching the match. That is the way that is the way Mother Nature works, and that's the way war works. What happens to the tree that does not put down its roots? Such a tree will die for lack of water or blow over with the first strong wind. Every mistake has its own punishment. How long does it take for a garden rake to hit you in the face when you step on the teeth turned toward you? Didn't you ever stub your toe on a rack? On a rock? How long after your toe hits the rock does it take for you to feel the pain? For all of us who had served on the staff for several months, it was difficult to keep from laughing when some new officer would protest General Patton's harsh reprimands. Some of our new staff officers were transferred from Washington. It was fun when the new officer would attempt to explain what he had learned in Washington. General Patton would stare at the protesting officer for a moment and he would grin knowing that a time bomb was about to explode. General Patton would start slowly. Colonel, what happens when you touch hot electric wires? The officer would answer. You get shocked. Right. General Patton would proceed as if he were leading a child. How long after you touch the electric wires until you get this shock? The shock would come instantly. Right again? General Patton would react as if the Washington officer was displaying outstanding intelligence. Now, that time span from the touch and the shock is exactly what we tried to do with our training for war. A mistake in war can cause instant death for hundreds of men. We are training for war, Colonel. We cannot delay punishment. When the punishment for a mistake is instant death, there is no point in trying to save the ego of a man if the man is dead. War is a killing business. The colonel nodded his head in agreement. One day, General Patton continued, since we have a little time today, let me explain why harsh punishment is so important. In truth, war is the result of an undisciplined society, a society of people that will not face the truth of discipline. War is a discipline for all of us. Let's get this into our heads. Discipline is a law of nature. Discipline can be delayed. Discipline can be delayed, but it can never be avoided. Mother Nature never lets a wrong go unpunished. The punishment may be years later, and punishment which is delayed will be more severe. Take parents and kids. If the parents cannot spank the kids, the punishment will be given later by the school teachers. Could be in school. The other kids will spank the kids that need punishment. The bottom was cushioned for spanking. God and Mother Nature never make any mistakes. If these mean kids are not spanked by the teachers in school, they may be put in jail by the police. General Patton paused as he looked at every one of us, almost to see as if we needed spanking. What happens when we get so many mean kids that the police cannot spank the kids? Self-punishment. Self-punishment is the worst type and the most severe. The kid who cannot discipline himself becomes the man who cannot control his eating and drinking or his use of drugs. What's the punishment? Liver failure, all kinds of heart problems, lung cancer, and many other severe punishments are given by Mother Nature and God. Could be years later. Several of us were anxious to leave, but there was no leaving when General Patton was in the middle of a sermon. The saddest part about discipline is that war is the result of a bunch of people who are afraid to spank their kids or put criminals in jail. School is a discipline of the mind. First thing you know, unspanked kids will start insulting their parents, teachers, throwing stones at the school, writing on the walls of public buildings. Why not? There is no punishment. In truth, the kids are not. In truth, the kids are mad that their parents and the school do not discipline them. Next step is these kids refuse to go into the army, even when drafted. Even when drafted, they burn the flag or run to Canada. They picket and protest and get little punishment. They might even picket Congress. General Patton smiled. You think I'm crazy? Some fool leader will give these young kids some crazy patriotic fight, some patriotic idea, and they'll jump at the wave of his hand. Hand waving is a good example. Again, General Patton paused to let his ideas soak into our minds. We could blame the German people, but we are not free from blame. We buried the discipline of our laws when our leaders break the law without any fear of punishment. Don't always blame the kids. They follow the leaders, their leaders, our political leaders, and movie starts admit in public to bribery, adultery, bigamy, and many major crimes. And the general public approves. Young people follow the examples set by their leaders. Adults are amazed at the violent crimes of the kids as they applaud the violent crimes committed in the movies. Murder is public entertainment in the movies. Can we be amazed when our kids beat up our older citizens? This time, General Patton gave a wave of his hand indicating that he was sweeping all of us into being responsible for the acts of our children. General Patton reached these conclusions in 1942 in explaining the basic cause of World War II. This was before our society rocked into discord music. General Patton continued, next thing you know, to get votes, congressmen will start cutting money for the army. You have heard the statements from our top leaders. We do not want war. What man in his right mind ever wanted war? Certainly not the military. The military have to fight the wars caused by those preaching peace at any price. There is possible way that any of us can avoid the punishment of Mother Nature. A group of young men at a university in England recently that they would said that they would never give their lives for the country. What happens? The Prime Minister of England starts saying, "We want peace in our time." What was he really saying? He's saying he's afraid to die. He's afraid to go to war. What's the result? Some tin horn spoiled kid, such as Hitler, thinks that he can wimp any country where all the people want peace. What results? War. When did the war start? In the minds of the men who were shouting for peace at any price. Church ministers climb into their pulpits and preach fear of war. What they are saying is they are afraid to die. It is possible to preach fear and faith at the same time from the same pulpit. Christ said we would always have wars. That is a law of nature. This time, General Patton paused for several seconds before finishing with words which I shall never forget. General Patton closed, saying, "In the United States, we never go to war. We invite the enemy to attack." General Patton looked at the colonel, who had made the protest over the harsh punishment. "Colonel, do you understand what the war is the result of a basic law of nature? Would you try to brush away a tornado with the back of your hand?" "No, sir." "General Patton, I would not." "Then do not expect me to fail to punish instantly. When you make a mistake, because in war mistakes, then do not expect me to fail to punish instantly. When you make a mistake, because in war mistakes can take more lives than a tornado. I cannot kill a man in our combat training, but I can make every man wish to be dead rather than face the wrath of my anger." There was a long silence as General Patton walked back and forth in front of the room. Every man knew that if a mistake was made, General Patton's wrath would strike with the speed of lightning. Many years later, General Patton's lecture came to me as I stepped on a carpet switch of a burglar alarm system. My mistake was in failing to turn off the system before entering the house. Our alarm was an air horn with a high piercing sound, which was set off when I stepped on the carpet switch. I never walk over this area of carpet without thinking of the instant punishment of that siren in General Patton's instant punishment lectures. The warden of the San Quentin. Let's look it up. We haven't looked up anything today. What time do we have? It's 11:23. This ends at 11:27. That's not good. One second. San, let's see here. San Quentin. Oh, there it is. The warden of the San Quentin gave General Patton's lecture in a different way when he was asked if he approved of capital punishment. The warden said, I approve of capital punishment for all crimes. I would put the man in a room with two doors. I would give every criminal the choice of going through either door. I would advise him that one door would give him instant death from a firing squad the instant he opened the door. The other door would permit him to walk out of a jail a free man. No criminal who was lucky to select the door of freedom would ever commit another crime because of his fear of facing instant death. Those men thinking of committing a crime would think of the firing squad before they would think of any crime to commit. We delay the punishment for our criminals too long, and the punishment is not enough to keep them from committing the same crime again. The words of the warden were almost the exact words of General Patton, who said so often, the longer the punishment is delayed, the more severe the punishment. We cannot... Wait. Hold on. Sorry. Yeah. We cannot build jails fast enough to house our criminals. What is the punishment for society? Society pays a high price in the higher number of robberies, murders, and rapes of the people who do not discipline their criminals with instant punishment. Proof that our society fails in the punishment of our criminals is in the entertainment which we enjoy. The movie Going in Style had the theme that living in jail is better than living as a senior citizen. The newspapers of today report people committing crimes so they can have the luxury of going to jail. Many will protest that no one would commit a crime for the sole reason of getting sent to jail. From my experience as prosecuting attorney for crimes committed in in Indiana, I can recall several down and out types that asked what was least wrong they could do so they could be sent back to jail. Proof of more crimes being committed when there is delay of punishment is in the Bible. Thousands of years ago, more crimes were committed when sins were forgiven. From Romans chapter 5, verse 20, sin will abound when all sins are forgiven by grace. War is the punishment of a society that fails to face harsh discipline. War can change society as suddenly as a person can change a lifestyle in an instant. Our terrible loss at Pearl Harbor changed our society in less than 24 hours, from wanting peace to demanding that we go to war. We never had such a uniting day for war in Vietnam. I remember December 7th for the change which it made in the lives of two men in two completely different lifestyles, one in jail and one in a church pulpit. On Monday morning, December 8th, I started the day with my usual routine of going to the jail to arrange for the release of our soldiers arrested over the weekend by the civilian police. One soldier was a heavy drinker and never missed being arrested every Saturday night. It was one of getting a place to sleep and warm meals for Sunday. Often he would take a taxi to the jail. This man was an unusual soldier in that he had enlisted on New Year's Day in top hat and tails and drunk from a party the previous night. I will never forget his face as he watched for me through the bars of the jail. He called to me in a stern voice, "Lieutenant, get me out of here." It was not a plea. It was a command, and not his usual Monday morning unsober voice. When I was closer to him, he said, "Get me out of here, and I will never drink another drop of liquor. I want to do everything I can to fight for our country. You can speak of being reborn, resurrected, or changing a lifestyle. The change of this soldier was in a flash. He stopped drinking. He had leadership ability and a driving desire to serve his country. In less than 60 days, he was in OCS, Officer Candidate School, and graduated to become one of our finest officers. The other men, the minister, I had met a few times in the local jail as he worked with the members of his flock. I was amazed to see this minister out of the robes of the clergy and in the uniform of a soldier with the bars of a lieutenant and the cross of a chaplain. I had to ask bluntly, "What happened, chaplain?" He was blunt in confessing, "I feel responsible for so many young men who will have to go to war. The least I can do is go with them." I was preaching a sermon on peace the very instant of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. "Peace will never come by preaching for it." Later, he quoted General Washington many times in chapel services, saying, "The way to peace is to prepare for war." These two men were now alone in their instant life change. Neither of these men had been under General Patton to learn of his principles for peace. Tragic as it is, there is truth in the words that Pearl Harbor was necessary to change the thinking of our people. About 40 years after the young men in the club at the University of England had resolved that they would never give their lives for the country, the same club resolved that they would serve their country, even at the cost of their lives. They added an additional resolution that their club had to share the blame for the failure to fight Hitler at the beginning of his attack on other nations. So many times, General Patton said there was only one kind of discipline, perfect discipline, which gives the punishment at the same instant the mistake is made. When we do not maintain discipline, we can cause hundreds to be killed. War is the delayed punishment for the society that does not believe Christ, who said, "There will always be wars and rumors of wars." Often General Patton used these words and added, "I wish Christ had told us how to avoid war." Men cannot be excited to kill with soft words spoken in an uncertain voice. When General Patton spoke, every man knew exactly what was demanded. General Patton explained, "It takes a lot of talking to get our American young men ready to kill, to murder. Killing is against their nature. The language of war is not polite. War is hell. A hell caused by society for the young men in military service. It is difficult to make a fine American young man understand that the enemy wants to kill him. We have to work hard to keep our men from being killed. We have to work even harder to get them ready to kill the enemy. Swearing helps get the idea across. When I give a command and put in enough profanity, the soldiers will understand. I use the language of combat soldiers. They know what I mean. Another thing, I always wear a war face. There dare not be any smiling when you give orders. War is not a smiling business. I will shoot any one of you who ever has any his picture taken with a smile on his face for a news camera. When he gave the war face lecture, I thought of the Indians who painted their faces for war. General Patton did not miss a trick in preparing the troops for war. With profanity, General Patton secured the objective of always getting his message to the soldiers. There is not much of a command. In the words, by the way, in the morning, weather permitting, we may decide to attack the enemy, I guess. If we all agree, in time of peace, the society of a true democracy often wants a military commander to take a vote of the troops for every command decision. I state with pride that I was awarded a Freedom Foundation Award for writing a magazine article stressing that our United States was not a true democracy despite the use of this word by our current public office holders. In the magazine article, I quoted the statement of General C.P. Summerall, section of war for President Roosevelt. General Summerall said, "One of the earliest forms of government and one of the worst was the true democracy, in which every question was submitted to the will of the people. We see outbursts of this even in our own day, 1933, and what is known as mob rule. It true democracy, naturally and inevitably degenerated into demagoguery. It is amazing that in America, our society sings the battle hymn of the Republic and gives the pledge to the flag and to the Republic for which it stands, praying for true democracy. Praying for true democracy. Our public office holders take the oath of office to support and defend our Constitution, which provides for a Republican form of government. It is necessary for candidates for public office to stress true democracy if they want to get elected. Our society wants polls taken on the will of the people on every decision of the government. Poll taking is a form of mob rule. Candidates for office have to use soft words to avoid stirring up the mob rule of a peaceful society. General Patton's commands left nothing to the will of the soldiers. He would order an attack by saying, Lord, at exactly 5 in the morning, we are going out and kill every damn one of those SOBs. It should be mentioned that for many years, our federal government had a Secretary of War and a Secretary for the Navy. When these two offices were combined with the Army Air Corps, the Department of Defense was established. I'm sure General Patton caused an uproar in heaven that our country would let the world know that we would do nothing except defend. He hated the word defense. He said so many times, let the enemy defend. We will always be attacking. It would be an interesting bit of research to decide if we have had more troubles with foreign nations since we let them know we do not have a War Department. When speaking to a large group of soldiers, General Patton never read his speech nor used any written notes, not even index cards. If a mic was needed, he never touched the long pipe from the ground to the mic, which was adjusted for his tall height. When he threatened punishment, his hand would be on one of his pistols. Many years later, I learned from his daughter that he had dyslexia, which made it hard for him to read. His eyes raced. In all directions over the words without any regular reading pattern. This would explain his great memory and lack of need for any speech notes. Reading over the notes, reading over the words so many times, the words would freeze in his memory. This reading problem is the reason he could quote so many verses of the Bible, as I mentioned later. Those who heard General Patton's profanity assumed he was always in a fit of anger. His fits of anger were the soldiers. Nope, his fits of anger were the methods he used to excite the troops. In anger, an angry soldier is more dangerous than a smiling soldier. After General Patton's fit of anger, before the troops, he returned a staff meeting and be as calm as a church elder. He would ask whether or not the troops received the message. Some of us always had to be among the troops to get the reaction of the soldiers. The soldiers who saw General Patton in profane action would never suspect acting his role as a leader. On the staff, we knew he was trying to get to act as the great military leaders of history had acted. General admired Alexander and attempted to imitate his methods of leadership. We knew he was acting because he told us so many times that we should try to imitate great military leaders. In lectures, I have mentioned that General Patton acted every day of his military life. I have also said that his timing was better than any modern day speaker. A great actress confirmed my statements. Lynn Fontaine, the actress and wife of Alfred Lunt, described General Patton's stage ability. Before her death, Lynn Fontaine was interviewed on television. She was asked, "What was your greatest experience on stage?" She answered immediately, "I was in Paris during World War II. We had finished our show and taking our certain calls when someone in the audience shouted, 'General Patton is here.' The house lights were dim, so I could not see the audience. I went to the microphone and asked, 'Would General Patton please come on stage if you are here?' Before I could finish speaking, the audience raised a deafening cheer with whistles and loud hand clapping. The cheers continued, so I knew he was in the theater. I never saw him as he left the theater because the audience was standing. My first glimpse of him was as he came from the right side of the stage. He was tall, and with his uniform and medals, he seemed too tall to come through the door. He was wearing his shiny helmet, which he removed and held over his heart with his left hand. I stepped back to offer the microphone to him. He winked and nodded his head to me. I shall never forget it. He marched halfway towards me, stopped, clicked his heels, did a right face, clicked his heels again, and saluted the audience as he held his helmet. The cheering increased. I was the only one who could hear his heels click. He had the salute for the perfect amount of time. When he lowered his hand salute, he did another right face with precision and walked off stage. He did not say a word, never smiled, nor gave a polite wave of his hand. As an actor, his timing was perfect. His salute was the perfect speech to give to such an audience. I'm sure the crowd cheered for an hour after he left. Alfred and I did not leave, but I can assure you, we did not get to our hotel until a late hour. Beyond any doubt that cheering for General Patton was my greatest experience on any stage. General Patton's acting ability generated a mystic faith in people, especially soldiers. He gave people faith in themselves. I mentioned Lynn Fontaine's experience one time in a lecture. A man came to me afterward to say that cheering in Paris did not go on for hours. I was there. I was in uniform and was never so proud to be an American soldier. The French would not let us leave. Everyone shook our hands, and as if some of General Patton's spirit would get through to them from touching us. There was one time I was not certain whether General Patton was acting or actually in a rage. One night, he knocked his turned on flashlight into one of the holes of our open pit latrine. We had the GI right angle flashlights with the belt clip for walking at night. It was easy. It was easy to knock the flashlight over when it was setting on a table or a toilet seat. The pit for our latrine was about 6 feet deep. The flashlight in the bottom of the latrine continued to glow. It was a most unusual sight to enter the latrine in the middle of the night and see the soft light glowing through our 6 open seats, giving the holes the indirect lighting usually found in nightclubs. General Patton's anger or acting continued into the morning briefing session of the staff. He said, "I'm the idiot that knocked his flashlight into the latrine last night. Put the cost of the flashlight on a charge and sheet to me. I do not want such a loss to be charged off as a battle casualty." Everyone laughed. Playing with the idea, he continued, "On second thought, I have a couple of commanders I know who are better qualified at digging out the flashlight than they are at leading troops. I may assign them the mission of digging out the latrine. No one knew the commander. No one knew the commanders who were in line for the flashlight mission. Every man who heard the story tried hard to avoid General Patton's assignment of digging out the flashlight. After the first few days of hearing General Patton swear, his profanity did not seem to be disrespectful of God. When General Patton asked the Lord to damn something, somehow it seemed to us that the Lord would obey. We knew that if the Lord did not listen, there would be no end of trouble. General Patton's relationship with the Lord was as if two old friends were showing off their friendship with words of abuse. General Patton was fighting for God. God should cooperate. His prayer for fair, whether for fighting, is an example. Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech thee to restrain these immoderate rains. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us as soldiers who call upon thee, that armed with thy power we may advance unto victory and establish thy justice among men and nations. General Patton expected the Lord to get the message. This call to the Lord was following the pattern of Alexander, who always kept his soldiers aware that he was getting his ideas from Zeus, the Greek god. General Patton's daughter, Miss James W. Taunton, Ruth Ellen, reviewed the text for this book and commented about one of her father's prayers. Another interesting thing that few people notice is the similarity between the prayer of Achilles at the siege of Troy and the prayer of my father put on his Christmas card to the soldiers at the Battle of Bastange. 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 Bastange? I gotta look it up. It's a battle. You gotta look up the battle. Bastonage. Okay. I don't even see it now. Oh, there it is. At the Battle of Bastown. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. At the Battle of Bastown, the Achilles prayer was as follows: O Father Zeus, save us from this fog and give us a clear sky so that we can see our eyes. Kill us in daylight if you must. Ruth Ellen continued. One of the chaplains asked, my father, if a Christian, should appeal to a heathen god in such a way? Isn't that blasphemous? My father answered, am I less of a man than Achilles, who asked his God for help as I prayed to mine? God is God, no matter what you choose to call him. Often General Patton would stress how to speak when giving orders. He stressed the importance of giving commands in such a way that soldiers would obey. He often said, I can tell a commander by the way he speaks. He does not have to swear as much as I do, but he has to speak so that no one will refuse to follow his order. Certain words will make you sound like a staff officer and not a commander. A good commander will never express an opinion. A commander knows no one cares what your opinion is. Never use the words, in my opinion, I believe, I think, or I guess, and never say I don't think. Every man who hears you speak must know what you want. You can be wrong, but never be in doubt when you speak. Any doubt or fear in your voice, and the troops can feel it. Another thing, never give a command in a sitting position unless you are on a horse or on top of a tank. Many writers call General Patton flamboyant without ever understanding why General Patton's angry voice. I enjoy watching and listening to candidates for public office. It's interesting to watch the candidates who know exactly what they are going to do when they get elected. This type of candidate usually will defeat the candidate who says, "Well, I think, or my best advisors tell me." An often cited quote can be used as an example. Few can forget the candidate for president who said, "I talked to my daughter, and she said her friends told her." That candidate was defeated. When General Patton spoke to the troops, he did not quote from opinions, advisors, or rely on anyone, unless it would be God. And he would swear by the Lord. General Patton meant everything he had. General Patton meant everything he said, and he said it in a manner that left no doubt about what he was saying. It was common for some freshman news reporter to ask, "General Patton, may I quote you in my newspaper on what you just said?" The general would answer in disgust with his meanest war face. "You can quote me anywhere you like on every word. If I had not meant what I said, I would not have said it." 12:23 and it's 11:50. Okay. How long have I been reading? Three hours? All right, we're going to take a break. Okay, actually, I'm gonna take a quick break, like 30 minutes or something. Come back and we're gonna do some more reading. Thank you.